This is Faith Under Fire from Family Life. I'm Greg Gillespie. Often our Faith Under Fire features turn their attention to big issues, things like politics and court battles over religious freedom, big social issues, and battles such as those. Today, though, we go very personal. Our faith can be under fire when we face grief. Whatever the setback, whatever the loss, recent or long ago, our guest today has some encouragement for you. Admittedly, these next 5 minutes may be a challenge for some of our listeners. We invite you to do what you need to take care of yourself and find people to encourage you. Maybe come back to our podcast page and check the additional resources there. But perhaps what Christian author Richard Battle tells you may be just the encouragement you need this week. We begin with his very personal story.
Well, my first child and only son passed away at 9 months old, and he had been unique not only to myself and my then wife, but unique in my family. He was the first child with my surname born in 28 years in our family, so never had a cold, fever, or any issues, and then all of a sudden one night passed away in his crib. And of course, we grieved significantly over that. It was a crushing blow, even being a person of faith. And the way I dealt with my grief was through reading everything I could get a hold of about the loss of a child from a Christian perspective, reading scripture and journaling. About 5 months after we lost him, some people in our church lost a son, and I shared my journals with them, and they encouraged me to publish that, and that turned out to be a book called Surviving Grief by God's Grace, and that was a story of the loss and healing from that from God's grace. And I had written my son when he was about 6 months old. I was concerned because I was a little bit older father, and so I'd written him a letter about the important things in life because I thought, what happens if I don't live to teach those to him? And I wrote him a letter and had 43 life lessons in it, and he had passed away 3 months after I'd written the letter.
The grief that comes from that, it's always sad to lose a sibling or a parent, but there is something that is upside down and backwards, and you and our listeners who have experienced the loss of a child, that is something that just absolutely tears at your heart. How have you discovered a faith, a strength to reshape your life in the new chapter?
Two important things I think that helped me. One was I learned I don't grieve where my son is. I grieve where he isn't. He isn't with me. That stays with you, although it lessens over time. And then the second thing that I think is really important, normally in adversity, the first thing people ask is, why me? And if we're not careful, we can be trapped. And so I learned the best question for me was, what now? In other words, what am I supposed to learn from this adversity that I can use to help others?
Give us some expertise from your vantage point. I know a lot of churches love doing Father's Day and Mother's Day celebrations. That is really hard for people who have a broken relationship with a parent or whose parent was not the proverbial ideal Christian father or mother. There are folks like you who grieve the loss of a child. How do we honor parenthood and fatherhood without making it a one-size-fits-all that doesn't fit so many people from pew to pew to pew?
Well, I think that's a great question. And my son's birth date was June 10th. So it was always about a week before Father's Day. And I only got to spend one Father's Day with him. Thank God I had a daughter after that who I cherish and get to experience that with. But those type of holidays, if you want to use that term, can be difficult. One of the other things I learned in the grieving process was when I focused on myself, whether it be the loss of a child or whether I went through cancer or other things, when I focused on myself, I hurt more. When I focused on what I could do to help others, I always hurt less. And so anytime I start feeling hurtful, if you will, I think, how can I focus on somebody else?
Author Richard Battle, thank you for joining us today on Family Life.